hunting?
It is, yes, I agree with you, but fox hunting is very important to me as well. And if she just left as it is now, where there's a ban on it, that would have been fine. But no, that has changed my mind, and I'm angry that she's even had to bring it up.
I mean, it is interesting that we have had quite a lot of callers say identical things to you on this, but do you not take into account, I think I'm right in saying she was just answering a question. Someone said, would you allow a free vote? And she said yes, and then added that she'd always supported fox hunting. Now,
Yeah,
I mean, I find that very difficult to think why somebody would change their mind on just that one single issue.
But she's obviously very much in favour of it, so it's something that she obviously enjoys. So,
well, she didn't actually say that she enjoyed it.
But maybe she does, maybe she doesn't. But it's something that it's very strongly I'm against. So that has affected my decision, and I will not be voting Conservative on that basis.
Who will you vote for then?
Probably UKIP.
And what if they don't stand in your seat?
Well, I think they will.
Well, of course.
But it's important to me, so I'm...
No, I can absolutely tell it's important to you, and I don't think anybody should underestimate the impact of this sort of rather emotional subject on people. People do vote on that single issue. Nominations close, by the way, at 4:00 this afternoon, so if you want to stand in the election, too late, I'm afraid. Well, I will be back tomorrow from 4 here on LBC. It is, of course, the battle for number 10, and tonight it's the first big election test live on LBC. Answering your questions, the Prime Minister and leader of the Conservative Party, Theresa May. The election starts here and now on LBC.
It's 7 o'clock on Thursday, the 11th of May. I'm Nick Ferrari, and you're listening to Leaders Live exclusively on LBC. In exactly 4 weeks, the nation will go to the polls, and over that time, you'll be hearing from all the main party leaders and, more importantly, putting your questions and concerns to them live. Here's how you get involved.
Call 0345 6060 973. Comment on LBC's Facebook page or tweet using the hashtag LBC Leaders Live.
Now, don't forget you can watch it all as it happens on lbc.co.uk. So joining me tonight, Prime Minister and Leader of the Conservative Party, Theresa May. Prime Minister, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
It's the first time that you've really done an interview since that TV appearance with your husband a couple of days ago. And for many of my listeners, that begged more questions than perhaps it answered. Because, for instance, you were a sort of victim of fake news. You said way back when I was wanting to be selected for a seat, one of the newspapers reported I was going to have trouble being selected to fight because of my new baby. Well, we didn't have a baby. We didn't think any more of it until that afternoon. My mother-in-law rang. What has the impact been on you that you've not had children, and how might Theresa May have been a different woman had she had children?
Well, I think it's impossible to answer the question about how I would have been had I done. I mean, it's been very sad. It just turned out not to be possible for us. Of course, we're not the only couple who finds themselves in that situation. And when you do, I suppose you just get on with life. We've got nephews and nieces.
Yes, so you have. But do you think you would have been able to apply yourself? Because I read that you are one of the hardest working Prime Ministers that we've ever had. Would you have been able to have all that much time if you were a mum too?
Well, I look at some of my parliamentary colleagues and people who've been in the cabinet who have children, and yes, they do apply themselves to that extent, and they're just very well organised.
Yes.
And I think that's the key thing.
Your father was a vicar, as you discussed, and you've said of your dad, I learnt a very strong belief in public service. Always try to do the best. I think everybody would accept that currently the responsibility of Brexit on your shoulders would be as big a deal as being the Prime Minister through a war. What did you learn from your dad about that public service or strong belief in public service that helps you?
Well, I think, first of all, it was about, I suppose, trust in people, in a sense. I mean, he was very clear that you should always take people as you find them, not have preconceptions about people. But that's actually about trusting people. And putting the Brexit vote into place, delivering on it, is about trusting the view of the British people. And I feel that very strongly for politicians. I think a lot of trust in politicians has worn out over the years, and we need to restore that. And I think delivering on Brexit is a part of restoring that trust. But as I say, in the quote that you gave there, the other thing my parents taught me, and my father particularly, was whatever job you're doing, get on with it and give of your best. And that's what I intend to do.
When you were Home Secretary, you once said you got between 5 and 6 hours sleep. You're Prime Minister now with a possible Brexit looming if you're successful in a month's time. How much sleep do you get now?
Well, you get a lot less during an election campaign, I can tell you.
What's it down to?
Well, it varies, of course, but I'm fortunate in that I've always been able to sleep pretty well.
Yes.
And it's important.
Yes. Policy in just a moment. A couple more questions about your background. I lost my dad at 22. You lost your dad at 25, and you lost your mother shortly after that. What was the impact on a fairly young Theresa May?
Well, it did have quite an impact on me. I mean, I was very fortunate in that I'd been married, not that long beforehand, and Philip's been a fantastic support for me, and he really was my rock at that time. I was an only child, so I didn't have brothers and sisters that I could share it with, and so suddenly there I was without the two people who had brought me up and who had meant so much to me throughout my life. So it did have an impact, and I think part of that impact actually was about sort of reinforcing the sort of belief in and importance of public service that I'd learned from my parents.
What about your faith? Did it affect your faith? Because you have a strong faith. I understand you go to church, not as a sense of duty. You go to church because you genuinely enjoyed, and obviously your father was a vicar. Did it ever impact on your faith?
I think my faith helped, actually, as well.
In what way?
In just, again, being a sort of a support there for me. And I was fortunate. I mean, you say I go by choice, and I do. And I was fortunate when I was brought up in a vicarage that I wasn't forced to go to church as the vicar's daughter. My parents always said to me, "We hope you do, but it's up to you." And I think that was very important and really very, very good of them, actually.
But, you know, some people... Here you are, you're 25 and you lose both your parents, one in hideous circumstances. Then, obviously, a few years later, you realise that you're not, for whatever reasons, you're not going to be a mum, and you still didn't lose faith. Some people say, well, this, but you didn't lose your faith.
No, because, it's difficult to explain in simple words, but actually the faith was there and did provide support for me in through those difficult times. And I think it's also... But it also was about the lesson that I'd learnt from my parents again, which is whatever circumstances you're in, as I said, get on and do your best. And that's, get on with life.
And
things happen.
Yeah.
And sometimes people face horrendous changes in their life and horrendous tragedies far beyond what we're talking about for me.
And how does your faith guide you as PM?
Well, I hope that I am able to... Once again, it's about appreciating, I think, the importance of trying to understand that people come in all shapes and sizes.
Even when people are being damn belligerent, whoever they might be, whatever side of the channel.
Well, as it has been said of me, I can be difficult if I want to be.
We're coming to that. Lastly, you have a phenomenal collection of cookbooks, I heard the other night. What I didn't hear, Prime Minister, is your signature dish. Before we go to the calls... What might it be?
Now, this is difficult because, you see, I do have a lot.
Don't tell me you've got so many.
Well, I've got about 100 cookery books, so
I want your signature dish.
I therefore do a whole range of...
So Donald Trump says, I'm coming round and I want you to cook us a dish. I'm coming to your house. What would you cook?
I might do something like a slow roast shoulder of lamb.
Oh, right, slow roast. And what's the key to making that really work?
Well, it's making a really slow roast, so it really falls off the bone. Absolutely gorgeous.
Sounds fantastic. Perfect Sunday lunch. Make sure you can hear, because we've got an earpiece in to take this call. Sophia is in Hastings. You're through to the Prime Minister. Sophia, go ahead. Good afternoon. Good evening to you.
Hi there. Theresa, myself and my partner are both working professionals. I'm a nurse in the NHS, and my partner's a web designer. We have a 2-year-old daughter, and I return to work after 9 months, as do the majority of my fellow nurses, because sadly it's not financially viable for me to not work. I should probably add, I have voted Conservative in the past. However, this time around, I'm thinking Labour is a better option. As you've referred to the kind of just about managing families and how the Conservatives want to help them. But in the past year, how have you helped them?
Well, I think I would say there's a variety of things, Sophia. I mean, first of all, you mentioned that you have a little one, and of course we have increased the support that's available through for childcare. You've said you've gone back into the workplace, so I'm not sure what childcare arrangements you've been able to put in place, but we have increased the support. It was in the past that families had 15 free hours of childcare for 3 and 4 year olds. We've doubled that to 30, something like. Overall, about 400,000 families will benefit from that. So that's one of the things we've done. I mean, one of the other things we've done, of course, is that we have continued to increase the personal tax allowance. So that's overall over the period that we've been doing that over the last 7 years. What will a typical basic rate taxpayer will on average be £1,000 a year better off from that tax change that's taken place. But I recognise that there is more for us to do in the future. And what I want to ensure is that we've got the economy that can generate the good jobs so that we're able to fund our NHS well, so that we're also able to ensure that people get higher paid jobs, and that for your little one for the future, we ensure there are those good school places available so that every child gets the best possible start in life.
Sophia, how do you want to respond?
Well, I think it's great that you've increased it to 30 hours for 3 and 4 year olds, but there is still a great gap there. You have introduced funding for 2 year olds for families in receipt of benefits. However, for the hundreds of thousands of families that fall just outside the benefit bracket, those just about managing families, there still is no provision for my 2 year old to go to nursery. Now, my nursery bill is coming up to £700 a month, which is way over 2/3 of my income. And actually, is it worth it for me to do that? And I kind of feel that some provision needs to be made for these 2 year olds, or in fact these 1 year olds. Like I say, I went back to work after 9 months because we needed both incomes in the family for us to get by. But actually, we get no help with that. I'm lucky in that my mother-in-law can look after my child, but there are lots of people who aren't as graced with, grandparents that can do that.
OK. I'm going to have to, because I have other people. Just a quick response to that final point, if you would, Prime Minister.
Well, I recognise, this is what Sophia describes is exactly the sort of situation that a lot of people, I recognise, find themselves in. They need the 2 incomes in order to cover the living expenses, and this does pose problems. That's why we want to ensure that we've got those opportunities there.
You made a very moving speech when you became Prime Minister about helping the just about managed. How far down the path would you say you are? And let's be candid, if you are successful in 4 weeks' time, you're going to have to raise more money to help people like Sophia, aren't you?
Well, first of all, you asked how far we are down the various things that I set out when I first became Prime Minister. And of course, a number of those are going to take some time. But let me give you one example. One of the issues that I raised was the injustice of the way in which people with mental health problems are treated. And I feel that is a real injustice. There's been a stigma around mental health for too long. I think we do need to ensure that we've got better provision for people with mental health. And we're going to look at the Mental Health Act. We're going to have a new legislation if we're in government for mental health. We're going to change the way the Equalities Act works in relation to discrimination in the workplace so that you can't be discriminated in the workplace because of mental health. And
How
this
does
morning,
that help the just about managings, though?
Well, you asked I'll come on to that, but you asked about what I said in number 10 Downing Street,
right.
and that was one of the issues.
Okay, but for the just about managings, and I'm sure Sophia doesn't mind me using that in this because she's termed herself as without raising more cash. Your problem is you're going to have to find more cash if you're successful in 4 weeks' time, aren't you? And my understanding is this where are you on the triple lock, as it's known?
Where we are is that pensions will continue to go up under a Conservative government. Mm-hmm. How we calculate that will be in our manifesto, and we haven't published that manifesto yet. But pensions will continue to go up. And of course, we have seen people can look at the election and look at the choice they have. If they remember, under a Labour government, there was a year in which pensions went up by 75p. They're now for a basic state pension person, somebody on basic state pension, it's worth £1,250, the increases that have been available.
But to
so
get
far.
the cash, are you going to raise tax?
But no, what we want to do is to be able to actually reduce tax on working families. That's the instinct of us as Conservatives, because we're a low-tax party.
Right.
What we want to do for families is across a whole range of issues. And if you look at, if I may just, Nick, for the Just About Managing, there's a number of issues for them. The changes that have been made in personal tax are a help, and we've taken about 4 million people out of paying income tax altogether. But there are other things people worry about. They do worry about the education for their children. That's about ensuring there's a diverse school system that gives good school places. They worry about whether their youngsters are going to be able to afford a home when they grow up. So we've got plans to ensure that we're building more homes for rent and buy.
Are you going to put tax up for those earning more money?
We are a party that believes in actually trying to ensure that we have low taxes, rather than the instinct of the Labour Party, which is to put taxes up.
It doesn't quite answer the question. Will you be putting taxes up?
Well, what I'm saying is we have no plans to increase the level of tax.
For the full term?
No plans to increase the level of tax.
But
what I'm saying is that that's because we're a party that believes in low tax, and our instinct is to reduce tax on working families.
Will that be for your full term, or you can't commit?
No, as a government, we would go into government with no plans to increase the level of tax. But as I say, what I would want to do, my instinct would be to find ways of reducing tax on working families. But of course, in order to do that, we need to ensure we've got the strength of economy. We keep the economy going, a growing economy. That's about getting Brexit right. It's also about, there's a stark contrast with Labour, whose plans would wreck the economy.
Let's get to more calls. Romina is in Leeds. You're through to the Prime Minister. Go ahead, Romina.
Oh, hi. Thanks for speaking to me. I'm a doctor based in Leeds, and I'm sure you're aware that healthcare professionals in the NHS are increasingly understaffed and overstretched at the moment, which is making it near impossible to ensure safe care for all of our patients. Now, I've personally dedicated the last 12 years of my life to a career in medicine. I'm a paediatrician, and it's quite sad, actually, because I'm now at the point of seriously considering resignation because things have gotten so bad on the shop floor. So I guess my question is, what are you planning to do about these crippling frontline staff shortages, which have worsened as a result of the government's failure to invest properly in the NHS?
Well, Romina, first of all, I'm very sorry to hear that you're thinking of leaving the profession, because obviously, as you say, you've devoted your life to it for the last 12 years. And obviously, we want good healthcare professionals to stay in the NHS. I mean, if I just step back for a minute, of course, we did ask the NHS to produce its own 5-year plan, which it did. We have put the extra funding into the NHS, and by 2020 it'll be, in real terms, £10 billion extra a year. And overall across the NHS, we actually see more doctors and more nurses in the NHS. But we do, of course, want to continue to ensure that we've got the money for a first-class NHS. We're putting more money in on other things, such as helping some of the problems that hospitals particularly see. One of the issues for hospitals we see is this interaction with social care, the problems of elderly patients in hospitals. I know as a paediatrician, you're at the other end of the age scale, but elderly patients in hospitals unable to be discharged. That's why we've put some extra money, £2 billion extra in the budget for social care.
If we go by the King's Fund figures, Prime Minister, they would argue that the £8 billion that was requested and given to NHS England, if you allow for various other monetary pressures, is actually £3.5 billion.
Well, actually, we didn't just put 8 billion in. We've put 10 billion. It'll be 10 billion that's going into the NHS by 2020, and that's 10 billion pounds in real terms. But yes, we do need to make sure that we're also putting money in, and we've put some more money in the budget to help A&Es, particularly because we know the
number of those were closed in
those.
January, weren't they? They had to close.
There was pressure on A&E. More people are going to A&E.
Right.
So we see, the success of the NHS is there are more operations, more patients are being seen, more patients are getting diagnostic tests, more patients are going into A&E.
Yeah. Okay.
But of course, we need to be able to support that.
Right. All right. Well, 20 hospitals in England were on black alert in January. I don't know how successful that was. Quick last word from you, Romina, before we go on to the next call. Romina?
I was just thinking, in response to what you said there, we've had lots of A&Es and GP practices close across the country because of shortage of staffing. I've actually witnessed organ transplants being cancelled because there haven't been enough nurses there to provide post-operative care. So whatever the government is doing, it's clearly not enough. And you've reappointed the Health Secretary, someone who has demoralised the entire workforce of the NHS as somebody. So it seems like you stand up and support somebody who has caused junior doctors to go on strike, who seems to be allowing the nurses to soon go on strike. And that doesn't seem to fall in line with what the front line of the NHS want to see.
It's not exactly unprecedented. It's pretty rare for junior doctors to go on strike, Prime Minister. It was under the current Health Secretary.
They did, and there was a new contract, and there were agreements reached on that new contract. And for a very long time, Jeremy Hunt was talking to doctors and deciding what the right new contract was.
You're aware of how unpopular he is. That doesn't mean he's doing a bad job, but you're aware he's unpopular.
Well, what I would say is this, that I think Jeremy Hunt has done a very good job in saying to everybody that what we need to focus on is actually the quality of care for patients. Now, our NHS staff work incredibly hard. I know, I'm a type 1 diabetic. I see the work firsthand that nurses and doctors in the NHS do, and I'm fortunate in the care that I get.
But it doesn't bother you that the bloke in charge is unpopular?
Well, what I want to ensure is that what we're doing with the NHS is ensuring that we're putting patients first. We've asked the NHS themselves to come up with the plans that they think were right for the 5 years. They did that, and those plans are now being put into place with the extra money.
Thank you, Romina. Stan is on Newcastle under Lyme. Go ahead, Stan, your question to Theresa May. Good evening.
Yes, my question is, seeing as though she failed to negotiate a contract with the police force at the time as Home Secretary, ended up enforcing one on them. She failed to negotiate the deportation of 6 Algerian terror suspects. And as previously mentioned, her Health Secretary also failed to negotiate a contract with the doctors and again imposed it on them. What makes her think that she's the person to negotiate the Brexit deal? Because her track record seems to state otherwise.
Prime Minister, you might want to address those failures.
Well, I was going to say, you talk about deporting people. I'll tell you who I made sure was no longer in this country: Abu Hamza and Abu Qatada. I'm pleased that I was able to do that. And as regards the police, well, yes, I did say to the Police Federation that I thought they needed reform, and the Police Federation has reformed. So I think that was a positive and a success, and will lead to the Police Federation being better able to work for the police officers who are its members.
Taking Stan's central point, which is, are you the Prime Minister to negotiate a Brexit? I understand you don't recognise hard Brexit, you don't recognise the term soft Brexit. Define a good Brexit deal.
Well, a good Brexit deal is one where we have a good, deep and special partnership with the European Union. We have a good trading relationship with the European Union. We're still cooperating with them on security.
Outside of the single
market. Well, with access to the single market, not a member of the single market. Because if you're a member, you have to abide by the European Court of Justice and free movement. Effectively, you're still a member of the European Union. We're going to be coming out of the European Union, but we can have a good comprehensive free trade agreement. And why you asked, Nick, why I think I would be a good negotiator. It's back to something we said earlier. I can be difficult. There are going to be tough negotiations, and I think it's important that we have somebody there who can go out there and bat for Britain.
But what makes you think Britain will succeed when every negotiation prior to this in Europe has never, ever gone Britain's way? I can point to problems in 2005. I can point to problems before that, should you say. I can point to David Cameron last February. What's the magic wand that you can wave?
Well, there are some negotiations that have gone well. I mean, we had this process, it sounds terribly jargonistic, but we had the ability to come out of some of their arrangements on justice and home affairs matters and then go back into those that we thought were necessary for our security. I had to do that negotiation as Home Secretary. Everybody said we wouldn't achieve what we said we would, and we did.
All right. Your predecessor, you may be aware, has been out campaigning in Crewe and Nantwich. I don't know if you've heard. He had this to say.
This is one of the most defining elections I can remember, where it's so important, not only that the Conservatives win and win well, so Theresa can negotiate that Brexit deal, so she can stand up to people that want an extreme Brexit either here or in Brussels.
So that is the reality why you called the election. Was it to be able to stand up to people here about the Brexit negotiations, perhaps your own MPs?
No, the reason I called the election was because I think we need the security, the stability for 5 years of greater certainty that can take us through Brexit and beyond. What David is absolutely right when he says about how crucial this election is, because it is about the leadership of the country for the next 5 years. There's only one person who's going to be
But so it's not about you being able to stand up, to use his words. He's wrong there.
It's about ensuring we've got a strong negotiating hand. As I say, every vote for me and my team, every vote for me and my local candidates will strengthen the UK's hand in negotiating that Brexit.
Jimmy is in Bolton. You're through to the Prime Minister. Jimmy, go ahead.
Hello, Mrs May.
Hello.
The manifesto, your manifesto, has not been published yet, but you've already said that you want to reduce immigration in this country to the tens of thousands. In 2010, the Conservative Party pledged to do the same and didn't achieve it, and in 2015 they pledged to do it again and didn't achieve it. And you were the Home Secretary in charge of reducing those numbers, and now you say you're going to hit the tens of thousands target. How am I supposed to believe, after 6 or 7 years of failing to hit that target, that you're going to have any success this time?
Well, what we've seen, Jimmy, in the immigration figures over that period is that they started to come down, then they went back up again. The last set of figures we saw, there was a fall. I say the tens of thousands because I think net migration should be at sustainable levels because of the impact it has on people, on pressure on public services, on wages at the lower end of the income scale. But it's not something where you do one thing and suddenly you've achieved your aim. You have to keep working at it. Once we leave the EU, we'll be able to set rules for people coming here from the EU, as we do at the moment for people coming from outside the EU. But when it comes to the election, there'll be a direct choice. Jeremy Corbyn wants uncontrolled migration. I want controlled migration.
But, Prime Minister, if we look at net migration in the year to September 2016, it did drop, as you rightly say, but you're aware of what the net figure was for non-EU citizens, are you?
Yes, for non-EU citizens, it was about 106. Not the net figure, the gross figure was about 164.
How are you ever going to get, even allowing for Europe, which may, some people say, a little pie in the sky, how are you going to get that down to the tens of thousands? The year before that, it was 191,000. These are big figures. How are you going to get it down to tens?
They are big figures, but the way that you do this is by ensuring that you're constantly working at this system. What happens with immigration?
You were Home Secretary. It's not like you were in charge of Northern Ireland or you're in charge of culture, media and so on. You were the one who could have influenced it. And you just haven't, as the caller suggests.
And we did influence it, Nick. We did see net migration coming down. We did make changes. We saw over 900 colleges closed because people were being able to abuse our immigration system and effectively come here to work rather than to study. But you have to keep doing this. You can't just suddenly say that the one thing you've done is going to make all the difference. You keep working at it. Once we're outside the EU, there'll be another part of the picture that we can influence. I think people want us to control our borders. That's what I want to do. Jeremy Corbyn doesn't.
I'm being told that you must go. Can I do one email before I let you go? Because I have got a lot. Stephen, I won't give you his last name. I'm 21 years old. I serve in the Royal Air Force. I'd like to know what you're going to do about the state of the armed forces. We're undermanned. We're losing people. Morale is at rock bottom. Today was Defence Day, Prime Minister. Are you aware? How many soldiers are there in the British Army?
In the British Army, it's about 79,000, 79,500.
Right, OK. It should be...
overall.
Slightly different to someone I spoke with a couple of weeks ago. Of course, in the Conservative manifesto...
Stephen's in the
He's in the Air Force. He is in the Air Force, yes. But it was Army Day today. I was discussing this with your colleague, Sir Michael. So, but there was a pledge that it would be 82,000 in the previous Conservative manifesto. I'm told again it will go to 82,000. I have to say again, why should we believe you? It didn't last time.
No, look, you're right. There was the last manifesto did have that commitment of 82,000. I think if we look at the armed forces, what we need to ensure is, yes, that they've got the manpower they need, but that they've also got the flexibility.
But is there a big recruitment drive?
They've also got the flexibility. Well, you've also, on top of the 79,000, you've actually got something like 4,000 in training at the moment. But what we need the armed forces to have is the flexibility to address the threats. And threats are changing, and we need to be able to adjust and adapt to those threats.
Two last questions. You've been called a bloody difficult woman. You've been called delusional by Jean-Claude Juncker, who changed that this week to a tough lady. Of the three, which is the closest, Prime Minister?
Well, I don't think it's for me to say. I think it's for other people to say.
OK. And lastly, who's the most important Philip on Downing Street?
Now, you wouldn't expect me to say anything else than the Philip that is in the flat that I live in Downing Street.
Taking out the bins.
My husband taking out the bins.
Even as we speak. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy. Can I welcome you again, or we can speak again before the actual day of the vote? Is that possible, Prime
It's always
Minister?
good speaking to you, Nick.
Thank you, Theresa May. Thank you very much. That ends the first LBC Leaders Live of this election campaign. Over the coming weeks, we'll hear from all the main party leaders battling for number 10. For Labour, Jeremy Corbyn, Tim Farron for the Lib Dems, and, of course, Paul Nuttall for UKIP. Stay with LBC for a reaction and analysis to what the Prime Minister said. I'm Nick Ferrari. I'm back tomorrow morning from 7. Good night.